back at the investing area. You know, we've got a small studio here, but we're able to do a lot of things. This is our investing area. We have our vacuum pump, our bell jar for pulling out the bubbles. All of the stuff that you're going to need for investing is going to be kept right down in here. I keep the investment in a smaller bucket so that if any moisture gets in it, it'll set it all off. We aren't wasting $100 worth of investment that's there. We have the rubber bowls. This is how we're going to measure our water. And then we have a scale here that we're going to measure our investment. And then this little guy I brought in because I think it was because one of our animals needed medicine. But there'll be times where maybe you need to put investment inside something, and to make sure that it gets in there, we can inject it in with that. So that one's down there. We have a ruler, and our investment ruler should stay here, and we should have masking tape here. So I've got my flask that I sprued up, and it's ready to go. You notice that I've washed off all the extra investment, making that really clean, because the old investment does not mix with the new investment, and it can affect the surface of your castings. So the next thing I want to do is I want to measure my flask, and this is really important. I'm going to measure the top. It's a 2.5 by 3, and that's really important because we don't want to waste the investment. So we want to only mix up the amount that we need. So then you come over to this chart right here, and this chart has the diameter of the flask. So I said 2.5, right? And then the height of the flask is 3. So I need 12 ounces of investment, and I need 136 cc's of water. The water that we use, we want to have just be room temperature. If it's hot, the investment's going to set up faster, and you're going to have a lot more air bubbles. And if it's colder, it might just take longer to set up. If I'm going to air, I would air on colder than hotter that's on there. It's really important that you know that this is your diameter and this is your height, because if I went by 2.5 by 3, can you see that the numbers are very different? So always check for flask diameter and flask height. Measure it, and then once you have what you need, that goes back in there for the next person. And what I like to do after I've measured is I like to take my masking tape. Oh, and it's old masking tape. I thought that only happened in my studio. I like to take masking tape, and I like to put it around the top of my flask, because we're going to fill the investment up. I'm going to make do here with this. Make note, get new masking tape. But what I like to do is I like to wrap masking tape around it so that I can bring the investment right to the top, which is what I need. And then I can vacuum it. And in vacuuming it, what it does is it rises. And in the rising process, it'll overflow, and then it'll clog the vacuum pump. And then I'll be really mad at you guys because it takes a while to clean it all out. But now, I think that'll do it. So my goal is to fill the investment to the top of the steel flask. When I vacuum it, it's going to rise up kind of like a souffle, and it'll run over if I haven't trapped it with the masking tape around there. Hopefully yours will look better than mine. Okay, so I've got that done. I now know, I'm going to put the tape back. I now know how much water I need and how much investment I need. I like to get my investment out before I do the water so that my hands are dry, everything's dry, and I know I'm not going to get any water in the bucket here. So I'm going to set this up, and I'm going to look at our accurate thing, and I'm going to come back over here, 2.5 by 3. So I need 12 ounces of investment. So this is a good time to be wearing masks because you don't want to breathe the dust. But what you're going to find is a twist tie down in here. This twist tie needs to get put back on here when you're done. If you don't, I can track down who didn't and scold you, or at least just tell you. But we need to keep it airtight so that we're not getting any moisture with the humid northwest. And then I'm going to open it up inside, and this is the investment. And I'm going to look here. I know that 16 ounces is a pound, so there's the 1 pound, and then I just need to back it up, right, to 12. So I'm going to take the investment, and this is not so precise that something's going to really go wrong, but now I've got 8, I got 9, now it's 10, and I needed 12, right?
Yep.
And that's a little too much. So, and sometimes I'll just tap it like that. And now we're back to just a little over. It'll be okay. This is a generality. What I want you to know is that sometimes when you mix stuff up, it's going to be too thick or it's going to be too thin. You're going to have to then problem solve by balancing that out. But measuring as accurately as possible is important. And I'll show you the consistency we're going to want. Then I'm going to take the time to put the twist tie back on the investment. This is a time where I try to work as cleanly as possible, not spilling a lot of stuff. So I'm going to put that away. And put this back underneath here. Now I've got my investment. It's dry, it's clean, my hands have been dry. Now what I want to do is I want to get my water. And so in looking at this, we're going to be working off of this side, going up. And what did I say, 136. So here's 130, and that's 2, 4, 6. So what I do is I put my fingernail right there, and then I step over to the sink, get the water running. It's a little cold, and then I fill it up. So my fingernail, and it must be my lucky day.
That's perfect.
Because there I am. You could go and walk away and come back an hour later, and then it would be room temperature. But really, what's room temperature? And here our studio is colder. So I just would prefer just right out of the tap. And then now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pour the water into there. And then just in case I'm off, I'm going to put a little bit of water and set that right there for me. Okay? So now I've got my proportions, I've got my investment, I've got my water. I'm going to come over to the investment process. I was taught to do it in 3/3 and 3s. I found that it's easier. I've changed a little bit. But what you need to know is that once you've got everything measured up, once you add the water to the investment, it's going to start setting up. Doesn't matter what you do, you can't add more water, you can't add more plaster. It's a chemical reaction, it's going to happen. So you really need to be prepared. You need to have your flask taped up, you got to have everything set out and ready to go. And when you put the investment in the water and you stir it, if you just stop and leave it alone, the investment sinks to the bottom and the water rises up and you don't have a good mixture. So the 9-minute cycle is keeping the investment engaged in mixing. So the first 2 minutes I'm going to mix by hand, and I'm really bad because I like to use my hand. I'm going to take Erin's ring off so it's not full of investment. And I like to use my hand so I can get all the lumps and everything out of there. I attribute this to kind of like when you make gravy. If I add the water to the investment, I'm going to get a bunch of lumps, just like you would with flour and water. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add the investment to the water. I'm going to stir it and mix it, and that's the first 2 minutes. And then after that, I'm going to put it in the vacuum pump. And the vacuum pump has a little hole here. And when we put the bell jar on it, it's going to suck the air out of here, and that's going to pull the bubbles out and away from your wax. I found that students always set their flask right on the hole and then it doesn't vacuum. So this was my solution to that. I would have designed this differently, but this is what we've been working with. Now when we set it on there, even if you set it on top of the hole, it's still gonna vacuum for you. And then it needs to be nice and clean around the edge with the bell jar so that when you turn it on, and I think I'll show you that, there's the switch right here. And now we have the sound of Jabba the Hutt. If you've ever seen Spielberg's way that he made all the sounds in Star Wars, they used a vacuum pump for Jabba the Hutt, which is cool. And then you can see that this has started to put some pressure on here. And I'm gonna tighten up the pressure. And it's climbing. And what we want the pressure at is we want it at about 26 PSIs. I used to have it written on the wall somewhere. And it's not PSIs, it's actually mercury per inch. So you can see it's climbing up. If it goes up to 30, it actually makes more air bubbles. I say it's imploding on itself. That's probably not right in a scientific way. But what I'll do is I'll back it off and I'll try to stabilize it at 26. And then I also like to tap on it so that it'll shake out the bubbles, because when I worked in industry, our tabletop actually vibrated too. So just a little bit of tapping really helps on it. We're gonna vacuum that for 3 minutes when it's in this bowl. And then when it comes out, we're gonna pour it into the flask, and then we're gonna put it back in for the last 4 minutes. It might take me a minute between getting it out of the bowl and into the flask. That's why I've given more time on the other end. But while I'm mixing, I'm keeping the mixture together. Vacuuming is keeping it together, and then when we pour it into the flask, that's gonna pull out air bubbles and keep it mixed as well. So to drop the air pressure, you don't turn the vacuum pump off, you've actually dropped the pressure. And what I found is students do it really fast, and then all the air bubbles that were coming out drop down onto your wax. So I like to take about 30 seconds to drop the air pressure. And if you back this up too much, this will come out. Just make sure you put it back in and don't strip the thread. So once it gets down to about 5 there, you can turn it off. And then the lid will come off. Otherwise, this won't come off, okay? So the old vacuum pump, it's been here longer than I've been at the college. It still works pretty well, but I think the real trick here is mixing up your investment to the right consistency, making sure that you work at those 9 minutes, and then also making sure that when you drop the pressure the last time around in the flask that you do it slowly, okay? Who's really great at this is Lori Elkin, because she was helping people last year and everybody had no bubbles. So not that I'm saying you should go to her, but that would be helpful. So I always like to test the vacuum pump and make sure that it's working before I mix things up. I have a little timer right here that I like to set right there. It's for 9 minutes. And so when I'm ready to get going on this, if you don't want to stick your hands in the plaster because it dries out your skin in your hands, you can put some rubber gloves on. You could use a spatula. In my opinion, it's better to use your hands because you can find the bubbles. You would never want to whisk because you don't want to put any bubbles in this. So while I'm stirring, I'm going to scrape the edge just like if I was making batter, and I'm going to make sure that it's staying consistent, but I'm not whipping it up to get air bubbles in it. So I think we're ready to go. I'm going to hit the button. Okay. I'm going to take the investment. We've got our masks on because of COVID. Going to slide this in. If you've done any plaster work before, you know that you're looking for that island. So see the island that's in there? Okay, and I'm going to go in and I'm going to start mixing this. And I can already tell that I'm going to need some more water. So what did I do wrong? See how crumbly it is? It's always good to do a demo when it doesn't work. So I'm going to add a little bit more water. If you add too much water, you'll thin it down, and then it won't be strong enough that when you shoot the metal into it, it'll crack. But now I'm starting to get what I would call something like Greek yogurt. Okay, thicker. See the consistency? Somebody taught me this that I thought was really cool. What you should do is make sure you get all the lumps out, scrape the edges, keep track of your time. Even if you're done mixing it all and it all looks good, keep stirring it. But when you do this, you come up, do you see the webbing that happens? That's the right consistency. Okay, so that's what you're going to have to learn, because obviously I didn't measure my water right? Or I put in too much investment in here. But this is looking good, scraping the edges. This is where we want to make sure that we never put any of this stuff down the drain. So we're now at 7:22. So I'm getting close to wanting these 2 minutes. I'm gonna scrape my hands, so you don't have to be within seconds of all of that. And then I'm gonna step over and I'm gonna stick my hand in this bucket and get the water off, or the investment off, so it's not going down the drain. I'm gonna take the lid off. Gonna set my bowl there. Gonna put the top on. Gonna turn it on. Should start climbing, but I want to tighten it down. And what you're going to be looking for here is something that looks like the bubbles that come up when you make pancakes. So we should see some of that. I'm going to start tapping on it. People have used the Scotch-Brite of the sponge on this, so you can't see it as well. This bell jar is worth about $120. So don't drop it on the floor, and don't use Scotch-Brite when you clean it. Okay, can you see the bubbles that are starting to come up? Okay, I gotta get the pressure going up. So this has taken a minute to get it underneath the bell jar and going. I love my students to be working in pairs when you do this, because the first couple times you do it, it's a little scary by yourself. So I'm getting it up to 26. I'm going to stabilize the air pressure. And now I'm just going to lightly tap, and you can see lovely pancake mixture. And I'm just going to let this come down to be just about a few seconds before 4 minutes left in our 9-minute cycle. I think I just do this out of nervousness, but I also think that it does help bring some of the bubbles to the surface. You should not see it more bubbly than what's happening right now. And then keep checking this valve, this and this, to make sure that you're right around 26. And when I worked in industry, it was like you're hurrying all day long, and then you come to the investing process and you stand here and you tap on it and you wait. So make sure that you give yourself 20 or 25 minutes before class is over with, or before you have to leave to do the investing. And so the two things that can go wrong in the casting process is you cannot measure your wax or your metal amount properly, and you cannot vacuum the investment in the investing process accurately, and then you're going to have a ton of bubbles. So I'm now to 4. I'm going to let it go to 4 minutes and 30 seconds, okay? 3 minutes, 30 seconds. I'm going to drop the air pressure. I can drop this fast because I'm not going to worry about the bubbles. Drop the pressure, then turn it off. Then pick it up. And then this is where you want to use this bowl, and I can see the consistency is really good. I'm going to hold the bowl, pinch it, hold it to the side, and I'm going to pour the investment in as if I'm pouring a good beer and not trying to get foam. And then I say goodbye to those two pieces. And I'm gonna let it fill up to the top, but not over the top. I'm gonna put it back in. I'm gonna put the lid back on. I'm gonna turn it on. I'm gonna get it back up in pressure. While I'm at it, I have a little bit extra. I'm gonna pour the rest of it in here. And we can carve it. So I don't know why I was off. And then I'll let that just set up. And then this I'm gonna put in the bucket of water over here. And then I'm gonna come in back and clean that up after I get this last bit done. So you can see that the investment is rising a little above my flask, and I'm really glad that I have the tape on there. And now I'm gonna tap. If in this process you see your wax float to the top, turn everything off, get it out, dump the investment in that orange bucket. Oops, a little high. And then re-screw it and mix up a new batch. So hopefully I'm not going to see anything. But at 26 mercuries per inch, it's pulling pretty strong. So that's why that screwing demo is really a critical step in the casting process. So we've got 1 minute and 35 seconds. I'm going to get down to about 40 seconds, and then I'm going to slowly stop dropping the air. And I don't want to do it really fast because you saw me when I turned it back down how quickly all the bubbles drop back down. What we're hoping for is to get all the bubbles away from our wax. I'm never going to get them all out. But I have two things I like to do for good luck when I do this. And I'll show you. I don't know if it helps or not, but it's my ritual. Bubbles coming up. So now we're at about 40 seconds. I'm going to start slowly dropping the air pressure, hoping to keep the air bubbles away from my glass, or from my waxes. If I did this really fast, those bubbles would get sucked back down in. This button, stop it, then I'm going to drop my air pressure. I'm going to lift this off. You can see that there are a lot of bubbles there. This is my ritual. I like to tap on this and see if I can get some bubbles to come up. And then if you're really brave, I'm going to do it. I'm going to come over here. And I'm going to turn the tumbler on. Why is it not going? Okay, so.
Is it unplugged?
What?
Is it unplugged?
No. Oh, it is. Well, let's do this one. Let's see if this works. So this is something else I do. You need to be really careful and very confident that you screwed it right, but I'm going to set it up on top here. And can you see the bubbles? I'm holding it down pretty tight so it's not jumping around too much. So one of the reasons why I like to do this is I didn't have a vacuum pump, but I had a tumbler, and this is what I used to do to vacuum out my bubbles. And you can see that they're really coming up and popping. And I have seen students have their waxes close to the top at this point. Never gonna get rid of all of them. Not sure about this investment, it's weird. But I'm gonna go ahead and stop now. And what we want to do is we want to see what's called gloss off happening. And gloss off reminds me of it. You're out at the beach and you're walking along and the water comes up onto the sand and it's glossy, and then when the wave goes back out, the water sinks down into the sand and it goes matte again. That matte finish, which it's just starting to do, should happen within a total of 12 minutes, okay? And that's when it's set up and it's kicked, okay? So what I need to do is wait for a gloss off to happen. Then I'm gonna take the tape off. I'm gonna take this, I'm gonna scrape it flat. I'm gonna write Hull STG and 52 grams on the top of it in the investment. And then I'm gonna let it sit. And it needs to sit for a minimum of 2 hours, but it could sit for 5 days as long as it doesn't get wet. And so what you guys are gonna do is you're gonna scrape the top, put your initials and names on it. You're gonna set it over there for me, leave the rubber base on. I will take them off, I'll load them into the kiln for you. The one thing that would be helpful is we have this chart here because it helps people figure out, I can come in, I can look at these and I can see the last time somebody invested, and I know that it's been 2 hours since they invested, because if I put it in the kiln sooner, the moisture in the flask is gonna make it all blow up. It's on there. So setup is slowly coming on. I'll put my favorite ring back on. And in the meantime, I'm just gonna clean up here. While that's setting up, I like to get the investment off. So just washing this out, taking this sponge, cleaning up if you had any go anywhere other than in the flask. Another thing, thanks to Monica, that I learned is you can wipe this all down. It looks beautiful. And then you come back a half hour later and it's all still got it on there. So this is a citrus clean. And if you spray this on here and then you wipe it down, it actually helps get rid of the rest of the investment that's on there. So I'm gonna be able to know who's made the mess, because you're gonna have your flask sitting there and you're gonna have signed in on the sheet. So just try to not make a mess in here, because I've seen it run down the sides. If you ever have your investment overflow, it's really important that you come tell me, because this can get filled with investment and then I have to take the whole machine apart and get in there, and basically hardening of the arteries happens and I have to put a new piece of pipe in there, and I don't want to do that. So it's still not quite set up yet. So a really important thing that I almost forgot is I gotta get my rubber base cleaned out. Don't leave them in here, they deteriorate. So I want to get as much of the investment into this bucket and then come over and then just rinse it here. We don't want to clog the sinks. And then I'm going to set that there. I'm going to let it dry. It's really important to have your towel here for some of this. So that's cleaned up and ready to go. And start the setup. See how it's gelling a little bit. So I haven't done any casting since last fall. It's been a year, so I hope this investment's good, but I'd rather test it on my pieces than yours. So we'll see. Aaron's got to invest his, and then we're gonna run a burnout and we'll be able to do the casting probably tomorrow. So I'm looking at the clock. It's 12:15. I can start the burnout when we go home at 4. what's nice is I got a programmable kiln. It's gonna run it overnight, and then we'll be able to cast tomorrow, and I'll show you that step of the casting process. Anything I forgot or missed?
I don't think so.
Find a partner and do this with somebody else. If it isn't me or Aaron, find somebody to go through it, because it's really, the first couple times you do it, it can be really overwhelming. Okay, so I'm gonna see if I can take this off. It's so much easier when it's just one piece of tape, but and then this goes into the garbage can, please. I'm gonna take this over to here. And it's still a little wet, but I'm gonna just scrape it right off. This has to be level to fit into the casting machine. Okay, so you can see it's setting up now. Still a little glossy, so I'm not gonna write my initials in it yet. I'm gonna let it set up. But I really find putting your initials right in the way I would do it, it's a little soon, but I would take my pencil and write Ho. And then I like to do SS as silver. But what's most important is my 52. And in this studio, we're using grams. So let's all stay consistently with grams. A little soon on doing that, but it works. Gonna set it right here. It's gonna set up. I'm gonna mark on here who I am. Day class, and it is
10:13.
10:13, and the time that I'm done is 12:15. It's going to be silver. It's nice just to add this on here, and then you know, and then this is the amount of investment that we use, so I use 12 ounces. Okay. And then your first flask is free. That's part of your lab fee. After that, you'll need to start throwing some money in the kitty. And the investment that to make that is probably about $1, $1.50. But it does add up over time in the casting process. Yep. Perfect. So if you're in here working and you find something that isn't working for you, tell me. And then I will make sure that we make it so it's easier. Just one last thing, the investment is setting up in here. Once this is done, I can plop it over, and then I could carve this, and then I could dip it in wax, or I could add wax to it if I wanted a hollow constructed piece. So I do like to try to save everything. Let these dry, and then we're ready for the next person to come along and do their investing. Okay.
Cool.